Nikolai Voss did not make mistakes with security, which is why, on an ordinary Tuesday evening, when he walked into his secretary's office to drop off a signed contract and found her laptop unlocked and unattended, he almost turned around and left without looking. Almost. But one line on the open screen caught his eye before he could stop himself from reading it. Subject: Voss, Nikolai, Financial Network Mapping, Phase 3. Confidential. Internal Bureau, use only. He stopped moving entirely. Below it, a folder tree opened on the screen, filled with names he recognized instantly: his shipping partners, his lawyers, 3 of his closest associates, each one tagged with dates, transaction summaries, and small red flags beside anything that looked, to a trained eye, like money that had traveled somewhere it shouldn't have. His own name sat at the top of the folder tree, 3 case numbers deep. Behind him, the door opened. Mr. Voss. Sophia Reyes stood frozen in the doorway, 2 coffees in her hands, her professional calm cracking for exactly 1 second before she rebuilt it. You're not supposed to be in here. Stakes. Plant the mystery, then twist expectations before the reader can settle. For 2 years, Sophia Reyes had been the best secretary Nikolai had ever employed, precise, unshakable, endlessly competent, the only person in his organization who could tell him no and make it sound like good advice. He trusted her with contracts that could end men's lives if they leaked. He had, somewhere in the last year, without ever admitting it to himself, started trusting her with more than that. He turned the laptop screen toward her slowly. Explain this, he said.
Now.
Sophia set the coffees down with hands that were almost steady. You weren't supposed to see that. I'm asking you to explain it anyway. She closed the door behind her, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed, not softer, not more afraid, but stripped of 2 years of careful performance, revealing something underneath that Nikolai had never once heard in her voice before. My name isn't Sophia Reyes, she said. It's Agent Sophia Reyes Calloway. I've been embedded in your organization for 11 months. Backstory: slow the pace. Humanize both characters before the plot accelerates. To understand the silence that followed, you have to understand what those 2 years had actually been. Sophia had come to Voss Holdings with a resume built for exactly this. Years of finance work, a reference letter that checked out because the agency had made sure it would, and an assignment that was supposed to take 4 months. Get close enough to document the money. Find the connections between Nikolai Voss's shipping empire and 3 unsolved cases the Bureau had been chasing for a decade. Get out clean. For months became 11, because the deeper she got, the more she found that didn't fit the profile she'd been handed. Nikolai Voss ran an empire built on fear, yes. But he had also, in 11 months of close observation, never once ordered violence against anyone who hadn't drawn blood first. He paid 3 former employees' medical bills without telling them where the money came from. He kept a framed photo of a younger sister, long since gone, on the corner of his desk, and Sophia had learned, slowly, unwillingly, that most of what people called cruelty in him was actually a very specific, very controlled kind of grief. She had stopped being able to write objective reports around month 7. By month 9, she had started deleting the parts of her surveillance that didn't matter to the case, out of something she refused to name for a long time. By month 11, standing in his office with the truth finally spilled open between them, she understood exactly what that something had been. Twist number 1. Reveal the shape of the real threat. Not her, but what's coming for both of them. 11 months. Nikolai repeated slowly, each word deliberate, like he was testing whether saying it out loud would make it more or less true. You've been recording me for 11 months. Not recording. Documenting. Sophia's hands were steady now, the agent underneath finally visible. There's a difference, even if it doesn't feel like one right now. Feel free to explain the difference. I was sent to build a case against a shipping route that's been moving something far worse than what you think you're involved in. She met his eyes without flinching. 3 of your associates, Callahan, Draz, and Petrov, have been using your logistics network without your knowledge to move something that has nothing to do with the cargo you think you're insuring. Nikolai went very still. Say it.
People, Nikolai.
Trafficking, routed through 2 of your shipping contracts, disguised as freight your company legitimately handles. I've spent 11 months confirming it wasn't you giving the orders. I've spent the last 3 confirming it very much was them. Emotional peak. Let the silence do the work before the plot moves again. The office was quiet except for the hum of the building's ventilation. You could have told me, he said finally. Any time in the last 3 months. You could have come to me. And risk you handling it your way before the Bureau had enough to take down the entire network instead of just the 3 men running it under you? Sophia shook her head. I needed it clean. I needed it complete. And she stopped. And what? And I needed to be sure you weren't part of it before I let myself trust you with anything real. Nikolai looked at her for a long moment. Really looked, the way he hadn't quite let himself do in 11 months of telling himself she was just very good at her job. Are you sure now? I've been sure for months, Sophia said quietly. That's the part one couldn't put in a report. Raise the stakes. The real villains step out of the shadows. 2 nights later, Nikolai called a meeting he had never called before. Not a business review, not a territory negotiation, but a quiet dinner at his penthouse with the 3 men Sophia had named, framed as nothing more unusual than routine. Marcus Callahan arrived first, all easy charm and firm handshakes, the kind of man who had built a career out of being underestimated in rooms full of dangerous people. Draz and Petrov followed within minutes of each other, and by the time the wine had been poured, the 4 of them sat around Nikolai's table like nothing in the world had changed. Sophia stood near the window, present in her usual role, the secretary who took notes no one paid attention to, the woman whose competence had become so unremarkable to these men that she had learned, over 11 months, exactly how much they said in front of her without thinking twice. Business is good, Callahan said, raising his glass. Route 7's moving faster than projected. Is it? Nikolai said evenly. Tell me about Route 7. Something in his tone made Draz's easy smile falter by a fraction. Standard freight, Petrov said too quickly. Textiles, mostly. Nothing you need to worry about. I don't worry, Nikolai said. I verify. Tension set piece. The dinner scene doubles as an interrogation the villains don't realize is happening. He let the silence stretch. He had spent 2 decades reading men across negotiating tables, and every second of hesitation in front of him now confirmed what Sophia had spent 11 months proving on paper. I had my logistics team run a full audit on Route 7 this week, Nikolai said, watching all 3 men carefully. Cargo manifests, container weights, arrival timestamps against departure timestamps. Interesting discrepancies. Callahan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Manifests get sloppy sometimes. Paperwork, not people. Funny, Nikolai said. That's almost exactly what I was told a decade ago, the last time someone tried to use my name to move something I'd never have agreed to. Across the room, Sophia's pen had stopped moving entirely. The puzzle box moment. 2 characters communicating without words, building on the trust established earlier. Sophia set her pen down against the notepad, twice, deliberately, a small motion, invisible to anyone not watching for it, but Nikolai caught it instantly.
She has something. Now.
If you'll excuse me, Nikolai said, rising smoothly. I want to check something with my logistics director before we go further. He stepped into the hallway. Sophia followed a moment later, notepad still in hand, closing the door behind her enough to buy them 30 seconds of privacy. The manifests you mentioned, she said quietly, fast. I already pulled the real ones 2 days ago. There's a 4th container on every Route 7 shipment that never appears on your company's official paperwork. It gets added after your team signs off, using a duplicate authorization code. Whose code? Draz's assistant generates it. But the signature that approves it every time is yours, copied from an old digital contract template. They've been forging your authorization on the 4th container for at least 14 months. Nikolai's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes went very cold. They've been using my name to traffic people, he said slowly, and building a paper trail that would put my signature on every shipment if it ever surfaced. Yes. And you've been sitting on proof of that for how long? 3 days, Sophia said. I needed it airtight before I brought it to you, because the moment they know we know, they'll either run or they'll make sure the evidence disappears with anyone who's seen it. Turning point, The hero and heroine become a unified team, not two separate agendas. Nikolai looked at her, really looked, the way he had been trying not to for months. You could have taken this straight to your bureau contacts and left me exposed as collateral damage. I could have, Sophia agreed. I didn't. Why? Because I stopped seeing you as collateral damage 11 months ago, Nikolai. I just didn't have a way to say that out loud until tonight. Tension set piece, the evidence-gathering centerpiece. They returned to the dinner separately, 3 minutes apart, and Nikolai steered the conversation back toward business with practiced ease while Sophia resumed her place near the window, notepad open, eyes down. I want full visibility on Route 7 going forward, Nikolai said. Every manifest, cross-checked against arrival logs, starting tonight. That's unusual, Dra said carefully. So, is finding out my own signature has been used without my knowledge. Nikolai's voice stayed level, almost pleasant, which made it worse. I assume none of you would have a problem with an audit, given business is, as you said, good. Petrov's eyes flicked toward Callahan. Callahan's smile held, but it had gone thin at the edges. Behind them, Sophia typed a short message into her phone under the table, sending it to the 2 bureau agents stationed a floor below, posing as building security, confirming authorization forgery. Need financial trace on Route 7 containers before midnight. Clock is running. The reply came back in under a minute. Trace initiated. 30 minutes to confirmation. Cliffhanger, cut right before the villains realize they're caught. Across the table, Callahan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and something shifted behind his easy expression. The specific stillness of a man who has just realized the ground under him is no longer where he left it. Everything all right? Nikolai asked mildly. Fine, Callahan said. Just business. He was lying. Nikolai had built an empire on knowing exactly what that looked like. Mid-story twist. The villains panic and escalate, raising danger past what was expected. Callahan excused himself from the table less than 10 minutes later, citing an urgent call. Draz followed shortly after. By the time Petrov made his own excuse, Nikolai and Sophia both understood exactly what was happening. They're running, Sophia said, already moving toward the penthouse's security office. Or regrouping to make the evidence disappear before your trace confirms anything, Nikolai said, close behind her. Which containers are still in transit? 2. Both due into the private dock by morning. If they reach port before your team or my contacts get there, everything on those containers, cargo, people, all of it, vanishes into whatever comes next for them. Sold, moved, or worse. Nikolai was already on his phone, voice sharp and controlled in a way Sophia had heard only twice before, both times right before something in his organization changed permanently. Ruiz. I need every man we have at the private dock within the hour. No one boards those containers without me there first. Stakes escalation. The abstract crime becomes an urgent, physical, time-sensitive rescue. Sophia's phone buzzed with an update from her bureau contact. They've confirmed the forged authorization pattern goes back 14 months, exactly like I said. It's enough for warrants. But warrants take time we don't have if those containers reach international water before the agents on the ground can act. Then we don't wait for the warrants, Nikolai said. Nikolai, if you move on this yourself, without federal authority present, everything I've built toward a legitimate prosecution could collapse. This has to be done right, or the people inside those containers become evidence in a case that falls apart in court instead of people who actually get rescued. He looked at her, and for the first time all night, something other than cold calculation moved through his expression. Then we do both, he said. Your agents get their case. I make sure no one on that dock closes those containers before your people arrive. The set-piece climax, physical danger, ticking clock, the hero's world colliding with the heroine's mission. The private dock sat quiet under sodium lights when Nikolai's convoy arrived, 20 minutes ahead of the federal team Sophia had coordinated. 2 unmarked trucks idled near the loading crane, engines running, exactly where the shipment manifest said they shouldn't be. Callahan stood near the lead truck, phone in hand, and the moment he saw Nikolai step out of the car, whatever calm he had left disappeared entirely. This isn't what it looks like, he said. It's exactly what it looks like, Nikolai said, walking closer, Sophia a step behind him, Ruiz and 4 of his men fanning out around the dock without a word needing to be spoken. 14 months of forged authorizations. My name on every shipment. Open the containers. You don't have the authority. I own this dock, Nikolai said. I own the shipping line. And in the next 15 minutes, federal agents are going to arrive with a warrant that makes very clear you don't own anything at all anymore. Draz moved first, not toward Nikolai, but toward the truck's cab, hand reaching for something under the seat. Ruiz was faster, closing the distance before Draz's hand found whatever he was reaching for, forcing him back against the vehicle with controlled, efficient force. Humanizing beat. Before the resolution, the emotional core of the crime becomes visible and real. Sophia moved to the second container, working the lock mechanism with the tool she'd carried for exactly this possibility for 11 months, and when the door finally opened, the sound that came from inside, quiet, frightened, disbelieving voices in 3 different languages realizing the door had opened onto light instead of another transfer, was the sound she had spent nearly a year working toward, without ever letting herself imagine what it would actually feel like. You're safe, she said in the calm, steady Spanish she'd used dozens of times in training exercises that had never once felt this real. Federal agents are 2 minutes away. No one is going to hurt you. Nikolai stood behind her, watching the people who stepped down from the container, 12 of them, exhausted, frightened, alive, and understood, in a way that no ledger or contract had ever quite made real to him before, exactly what his name had been used to build. Resolution of the crime plot, justice through evidence, not through violence. Federal agents reached the dock 4 minutes later, and what followed was quiet, procedural, and, to Sophia, more satisfying than anything dramatic could have been. Callahan, Draz, and Petrov were read their rights against the same crane that had spent 14 months loading the evidence of what they'd done onto ships with Nikolai's name stamped on every manifest. Agent Reyes Calloway, the name Sophia gave the arresting team without hesitation now, stayed to oversee the transfer of the 12 people rescued from the second container into the care of a federal support team, translators and medical staff arriving within the hour. Nikolai stood at the edge of the dock, watching the last of the flashing lights fade into the process of an investigation that would take months to fully unwind, and found Sophia beside him sometime near dawn, exhaustion finally visible on her face for the first time all night. Your case is made, he said. Most of it. She looked out at the water. There'll be a trial, depositions. Probably a request for you to testify about the forged authorizations, since you're the injured party as much as anyone. And you. Reassignment, probably. 11 months undercover usually means a desk for a while after, whether I want it or not. Quiet moment. Let the audience breathe before the final emotional beat. Do you regret it? Nikolai asked. Any of it? Sophia considered the question honestly, the way she hadn't let herself consider much of anything for 11 months. I regret every day I lied to you about my name, she said. I don't regret a single thing. Emotional reckoning. The couple confronts what the deception cost, and what survived it. 3 days later, Nikolai found Sophia in the office that had been hers for 2 years, her real desk, her real handwriting on the files, everything about her exactly as competent and precise as it had always been, except now he understood the competence came from 2 entirely different kinds of training layered on top of each other. You're packing, he said, nodding at the box on her desk. Standard procedure. Undercover agents don't usually stay on as the secretary once the case closes. She didn't look up. I assumed you'd want a security review before you trusted anyone in a position like mine again, anyway. I don't want a security review. He stepped further into the office. I want to know what happens now. Not to the case. To this. Sophia finally looked up. I don't know what you're offering, Nikolai. I spent 2 years pretending to be one thing while actually being another. You have every reason not to trust a single thing I say next. I have every reason to distrust the job, he said. I don't distrust you. Not anymore. 11 months of watching you make sure innocent people didn't get hurt in a war you didn't start. That tells me more about who you actually are than any resume ever could. The vulnerable admission. Hero states plainly what he's been protecting through control. For 2 years I told myself you were just the best secretary I'd ever hired, he continued. I told myself the reason I never crossed a line was professionalism. It wasn't. I didn't reach for you, because some part of me already knew there was something you weren't telling me, and I respected whatever that was more than I respected my own certainty that I wanted to. Sophia's composure, built over 11 months of controlled performance, finally cracked all the way through. I don't know how to do this without a cover story, she admitted quietly. I don't know who I am with you if I'm not also managing your calendar and hiding a badge in my desk drawer. Then we find out, Nikolai said, slowly, honestly, however long it takes. Twist number 2, a final complication, quickly resolved, that lets the heroine make the choice fully her own. Her supervisor called that afternoon with the reassignment Sophia had expected, a desk position at the regional office, standard protocol after any operation this long, effective in 2 weeks. She sat with the offer for a long time before she called back. I want to request a transfer instead, she told her supervisor. Financial Crimes Division, based here. I know the network better than anyone else in the bureau, at this point. It would be a waste to move me somewhere that expertise doesn't matter. That's not usually how this works, Reyes Calloway. No, she agreed. But I think you'll find the case I just closed makes an unusually strong argument for making an exception. The transfer was approved within a week, not because of anything personal, she made sure of that, but because the argument was, on its own professional merits, completely true. The earned ending mirrors the opening, an unlocked screen, but this time nothing to hide. A month later, Nikolai walked into what had been Sophia's office out of 2 years of habit, expecting to drop off a contract on an empty desk. She was there instead, laptop open, screen unlocked, exactly like the night this had all started. This time, when he glanced at it out of old habit, there was nothing to find that she hadn't already told him herself. You could knock, she said, not looking up, a smile in her voice. Old habits. Old habits nearly gave you a heart attack a month ago. They also introduced me to the only person who's ever told me the truth about my own organization instead of what I wanted to hear. He set the contract on her desk. I'd call that a fair trade. Sophia finally looked up at him, and there was none of the careful performance left in her expression. No cover story, no controlled distance, nothing left to manage. For what it's worth, she said, Agent Reyes Calloway thinks Nikolai Voss cleaned up his own house faster and more thoroughly than any federal case ever could have. And Sophia Reyes? Sophia Reyes was always real, she said quietly. That part was never the lie. He came around the desk, and this time there was no hesitation in either of them, no badge to hide, no forged signature to uncover. Just 2 people who had spent 2 years building trust under conditions designed to make that impossible, and had somehow, against every likelihood, built it anyway. Final beat, the payoff line the whole story has been building toward. No more hidden identities, Nikolai said. No more hidden identities, Sophia agreed. Just the 2 people who were underneath them the whole time. End.